Tanner Koziol is the most important player in this transfer class, so says the community.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. I'm your host, Reiger. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and thank you for being here. Thank you for being an everydayer. Today's episode, we're talking about the most underrated guys in this transfer portal class that are coming in, the highest ranked player, and our community transfer ranking show that we do with the high school recruits and the transfer portal guys. I'm really excited to get into it because this is quite literally a reflection of what the Badger community, who is especially this Locked On community, who are just the most plugged in and intelligent Badger fans that are out there. This is the reflection of what those fans think of the transfer portal guys coming in. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting right now. New customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, let's get into it. So we asked people on Twitter, in the Discord, DM me, send me your top five transfer portal guys. So everyone put their list together. We add it all up. We average it out. We get the top five plus whatever other players got votes. So we can go all the way down the list. We're going to start at the top. Number one on the transfer portal community list. And this, just for fairness, just so everyone's tracking along, people could do this ranking in any order they wanted in terms of whatever perspectives they were looking at, whether it's the biggest portal wins, the most talented, the highest upside, the most likely to play next year, the most likely to play a significant role, the most important win, whatever it is, right? So you can use whatever metrics you want to use, come up with your top five from this portal class coming in, this big portal class coming in for the Badgers football team. Number one, with 101 total points, Tanner Koziol comes in number one, the big tight end coming out of the MAC, 90-plus receptions last year. For each of these players, I'm also going to give them a percentage of if I expect them to be a significant player next year on this roster. 100% for Koziol, 100%. You can Sharpie his name into the starting tight end spot and then laminate over that Sharpie and then like staple plexiglass over the top of that. Tanner Koziol is going to be in that lineup. He is going to be a fixture in that lineup, like Arnold in Terminator. He's just going to be a fixture. He's not going to come off the field. So he gets the number one spot on this list, which makes sense. He was number two on my list. We're going to get into my number one in a second, but Tanner Koziol, for the impact, the need at that spot, the production, you start to measure, well, has he produced? Yes. Is he a veteran guy? Yes. Is it a spot that's needed? Yes. Huge win? Yes. That's a player they locked up early. They had their sights on him really quickly. I know the staff is excited about it. Grimes is a guy who likes to use tight ends. For all those reasons, it makes a ton of sense. Tanner Koziol, number one on the portal list. Number two, and this was my number one, Billy Edwards Jr. And again, it's for all the reasons I had Van Dyke really high last year. It's the quarterback. The quarterback is just the most important spot, not just in football. It's one of the most important spots in any sport in the world. You have a great quarterback, a good quarterback, a bad quarterback. It either elevates everything around it or it sinks everything around it. It has such an impact on the entire team, the offense, the defense, how you call plays, if you can run the ball because you're able to pass it, calling the correct adjustments at the line, audibling into something that makes more sense. The leadership and the intangibles from that spot are so incredibly important. You know, Russell Wilson was a great athlete, a really good thrower. One of the first things we heard about Russell Wilson when he came to Madison was the leadership, the intangibles. That's something we've heard about Billy Edwards Jr. from people who cover Maryland, from people who I've already talked to some people who are very impressed with the way he carries himself, the leadership there. I have him at number one. He was number two on this list with 99 total votes, so just behind Tanner Koziol. So right there. And one of the things you look at when you start to break these rankings down from a community standpoint, that's the top tier. There's a tier of two in this transfer portal class. Not to say others won't surprise, and certainly we were wrong last year on some of the portal guys. Like there's going to be surprises, but very clearly the community looks at Tanner Koziol and Billy Edwards Jr. as a very clear-cut tier one of these guys. And then we're going to get into the tier two. So Billy Edwards Jr., number two on the community list. Number three, Mark Hamper, the receiver from Idaho, coming in at 59 votes. So again, that's a pretty significant down drop from what Koziol and Billy Edwards were there 101 total points, 99 total points. Now you got 59 total points. And again, the higher people rank these players on their ballots is essentially the more points you're going to get. So that's how that point metric works. Mark Hamper comes in at number three on the community list. That's exactly where I had him on mine. I had him at number 3 on my list as well. He's a bigger receiver coming from Idaho. You check the boxes of there's real production there. This is a player that had a really, really high yards per catch last season for Idaho, had 50-ish catches, had almost 20 yards per catch. I don't have the numbers up in front of me. Good size, contested catch guy, more athletic than he gets credit for, probably going to be good in the red zone. And again, what have we talked about on this team? What's a big need? It's that receiver opposite Vinny who can be a little more physical. Hamper could fit right into that. Hamper could fit right into that bigger kind of X receiver who has to deal with a little bit more press coverage, has to be a little bigger, a little more physical. Is he going to do it in the Big Ten level? We got to see, right? There's absolutely a transition there, but I like younger receivers that have production in their background, that have some physical tool set, our skill sets. Like he has size and his ability to catch the ball, contested catches. That's a carrying skill set for him. He's got production. He comes in at number 3 on the list. I would give him like a 95% chance of being a productive part of this 2 deep next year. Again, for all these transfers, I'm going to give you a gut percentage on how likely it is that I think they're going to be a productive member of the 2 deep. Not necessarily starting, but they're going to play significant minutes in close games in certain positional packages at a minimum. Koziol's 100%. Billy Edwards is obviously 100%. There's your starting quarterback. I think Hamper's like 90, 95%. I think it's very likely he's falling somewhere in that 2 deep. This was a player that was pursued by several other colleges. The production's there, the size is there, and the Badgers' need is there. So I think it's very likely he plays a significant role somewhere in the 2 deep, but I'm going to put it at like 90, 95%. I don't think it's 100%. In the comments, let me know what your percentages are on these guys, just in terms of how likely it is they are significant members of the 2 deep next year. Let's go to number 4. JVR Suggs coming in with 27 points. So again, it's a big jump down. There was a very clear top 2 tier. Hamper's almost in his own tier at 3. And now we're getting into tier 4, which is much more convoluted, much more crowded with players. JVR Suggs comes in, defensive lineman. The Badgers got him from LSU, played at LSU last year. Analytically, if you go look at Pro Football Focus, if you go look at some of the clips, he was one of LSU's better interior pass rushers. Didn't play a ton of snaps, but I think there is interior burst there. I think there is some quickness there. He was actually number 4 on my list as well. So this is the community list is mirroring what I had. I had JVR Suggs at number 4. I just think he gives his staff some of what Elijah Hills gives them, and maybe in a little bit even of a bigger body. He would have graded out as the top pass rusher on the Badgers defensive line last year if he had put up the same Pro Football Focus for the Badgers that he did for LSU. So I think you're bringing in somebody. Some of the film is pretty impressive when you see the burst off the line of scrimmage. I don't think it's an every down defensive tackle, every down interior guy, but I think it's somebody that on 3rd and 7, 3rd and 11, 2nd and 10, I think it's a body you can put in there and get some disruption in the interior of the pocket, which is one of the toughest things to find in football, is to find that disruptive interior guy. I have him at about 80%. I think it's a much more likely chance that he finds a role in that 2 deep next year than he doesn't. But again, we're going to start getting to the point here where, I mean, I'm not putting my mortgage on any of these guys outside of Koziol, probably Hamper, and Billy Edwards Jr. So he's number 4 on the community list. Number 5, Mason Reiger. Reiger is super interesting to me. There's a couple players in this portal class that are coming in. And just to rehash everybody, Mason Reiger was one of the first guys that came aboard for the Badgers, played at Louisville 2 years ago, had 5 sacks in the ACC. So against high-level competition, had a sack against Tyler Van Dyke, which was fun to see. He had some nice moments against real teams, against Notre Dame, against Miami, but he also missed last year with a knee injury. He's very, very much a boomer bust guy. I give it about a 55% chance just because it's hard to be incredibly certain on a defensive lineman that just missed a year with a knee injury. Now, if he can play, if he's healthy, if he can stand up to the rigors of Big Ten play, this could be a really underrated get for the Badgers because his production in the ACC would have been, it's been since what? I don't know, Alec James, Chikwe Abasi, since the Badgers had a defensive lineman with 5 or 6 sacks, maybe Matt Henningsen, but I don't even know if Henningsen ever did what Reiger did from a production standpoint. So I think if he hits, it's a big deal, but it's just hard to fully bet on it with a guy that missed a year off injury last year. Coming up, we're going to get into the next group of players, including a guy who I think, I'm just going to tell you, Matt Jung is underrated by y'all. We're going to get into him on the next tier. That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. First, let's talk about our good friends over at FanDuel. FanDuel is awesome. I've talked about it a lot. FanDuel is your spot for all your sportsbook needs. The official sportsbook of the NFL. Let's go. The official sportsbook of the NFL, of Locked On Podcast Network, because everything you need is there. It's like a Whole Foods. You go there and You walk out with everything you needed plus more, right? They got everything you want. It's organized. It's neat. The customer service is fantastic. You get quick payouts if you win. I've told the story before, but like the first online betting site I ever used years and years and years ago, I'm not going to throw any names out there, but when I won, it felt like money was getting routed through like third world, former Russian bloc countries. And I don't know. I don't even know if I usually ever got it, right? FanDuel's not like that. You can trust FanDuel. They're like your grandma, and you can trust your grandma. Right now over at FanDuel, visit FanDuel.com. Join today. Get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make the playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel. That's the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And again, the official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. All right, let's jump into our next topic here as we continue to just count down the transfer portal players, the community ranking show. Let's get into Parker Peterson comes up next. Number 6 on the list is Parker Peterson. Parker Peterson's coming from Tulane, 6'3", 6'4", 300 pounds, good size. I think he's fine. He was lower on my list, if I'm going to be honest, because I just don't know if there's a lot of, he feels kind of like maybe you took a Kurt Neal out of the rotation, you replaced him with a Kurt Neal. You kind of just got another body there. I think he's fine. I think he's solid. I think he's going to help against the run. He's a little bit bigger than Kurt Neal, which certainly helps. I do think it's at some point, I don't want to talk poorly about it. I think at some point you just need more bodies on the defensive line. He gives you body, he gives you size, he gives you experience. He gives you a guy that on first and second down is going to probably play a role. I don't think he starts, but it's too early to say. Like there's so many new bodies and there's so much flux on the defensive line. I think it's kind of early to talk about, I think this guy's starting or this guy's not. Like they got to get to spring ball and figure that out. I think he could find a role in the 2 deep as a run stopping defensive end, kind of a 3-tech, somebody who on first and down, second and 4 can maybe gum it up a little bit. I don't know if there's a lot more juice than that with Parker Peterson, but coming in at 6, I got him at about an 80% chance to play a lot in the rotation, just because I do think this team desperately needs run stoppers on first and second down. You got to stop the run. We saw it last year. We've seen that for 15 years at Wisconsin. We've seen that forever in the Big Ten. Even in the proliferation of air raid and dairy raid and spread and go, you got to stop the run, period. Especially in college football. You got to stop the run. And if you can't, teams are just going to bully you, man. They're going to stuff you into a locker, and you're not going to be able to get out of it because they don't care how fast your secondary is. They don't care about how athletic your edges are. If they can just push you around the field like you're on wheels, that's what they're going to do. I think Parker Peterson, guys like that are going to help you in that role this year. So I give it an 80% chance that I think he's going to find a role in the 2 deep and play quite a bit. Next coming up, Matt Jung, number 7 on this list, coming in with 12 points. I think this is one of the more underrated guys that the Badgers brought in. Initially, I was kind of like, man, I don't know, coming from D3. You go and watch some film, and then you go and talk to some people. You hear him speak about just his love for the game. He's got good size. He was Division III Defensive Player of the Year, I think it was. I'd have to go back and check, but I think athletically he has the size and the tools to be an in-box safety for the Badgers, and they need some toughness. They need to replace some of that with Hunter Wohler. That's the other thing. I think there's an intangible there, coming back to play in state, chip on the shoulder, coming up from a lower level. I think that he's a fan of the program. It didn't take him long to decide to be a Badger once he got back here. I think he could become a bit of a fan favorite. I think he could replace some of the culture and toughness that Hunter Wohler had. I think he's got enough size to be an in-the-box safety. Plus, there's something about playing for the home state. So I have Matt Jung. I think he might outperform this a little bit, but he is number 7 on this list. I do have him at like a 50% chance of playing quite a bit, finding a role in the 2 deep, just because that is such a massive jump. And as much as I like the story, I think the intangibles are going to be there. I think the size is there. That's still a massive jump for him, and we got to see what it looks like in spring. Coming up at 8 on the community list is Matthew Traynor, the other safety. A little leaner, a little more maybe of a ball hawk type of a guy. I also have him at about 50%. I think it's likely one of these two plays a pretty big role for the Badgers next year. I'm not sure if both of them do. Traynor is somebody, again, who I think brings a little bit more speed and athleticism than Jung, not quite as much size. I'm going to be interested to see which one of those players starts to elevate in spring, because you still are going to have a Austin Brown. You're still going to have a Preston Zachman. You're going to have a couple freshmen that are going to be fighting for it. Owen Arnett has shown some nice moments as a preferred walk-on type. He's going to be back. There's Raphael Dunn, who could end up in his safety, kind of a hybrid role there. There's a lot of pieces in that secondary, especially at the safety spot, that are in flux. I don't think both of these transfer guys are going to come in and be immediate members of the 2D. I think one of them will be Young or Trainer. My early money is just kind of on Young, but I don't know. But we have to see. So I gave them each a 50% chance of making kind of a big impact here. Next up on the list, and now we really drop down into the last tier. Now we drop down into the tier of people got on one ballot, maybe got voted twice, but at the very end. Next up is Tyrese Fearby, the linebacker out of UNC. He's fascinating to me. We're going to talk about him more in the next segment, but that is just a big-time lottery ticket, and I don't think it's one that you need to cash in this year. I think you still have Daryl Peterson coming back. You have Witt. You have a couple younger guys, but Fearby is the type of player you get in and you see what he could potentially be, because there are unique athletic tools with him. He's a lottery ticket that is worth buying and scratching off. And chances are it's not going to scratch off successfully because it hasn't translated yet. But he was a 4-star prospect out of high school, a lot of size and speed, really nice wingspan. You get a couple of those every year just to see if you can hit the lottery ticket. Because if you do, he's got NFL type of measurables. And if you don't, that's fine. You have to take a chance on some of those high upside picks. Jayden Ballard is another guy we're going to talk about here. He's another one of those types, which is a high upside player with unique physical tools and physical skill sets. Coming up next on the list, Deone Hill, the transfer cornerback from Miami. Didn't play particularly well in Miami, but he did play a lot. He is experienced. He has played a lot of college ball. He has decent size. I talked to a media member covering Miami, and the reports back on Deone Hill weren't great. But he also dealt with an injury. Their defense was kind of a disaster. They fired the defensive coordinator. So there was a lot of things going around that Miami program where maybe Deone Hill is not put in the best position to succeed. So he's coming up, what was that, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10th on this list in the portal community rankings. Number 11 is Daniel O'Neal. And Daniel O'Neal is a guy I had higher when I went back and revised my list because he's the backup quarterback. And I can't remember the last time the Badgers didn't need a backup quarterback. Jack Cohn dealt with injuries. Graham Mertz dealt with injuries. Certainly Mordecai dealt with injuries. Tyler Van Dyke dealt with injuries. I mean, you just keep going back and back and back. And every year you've needed a backup quarterback to come in and play kind of significant minutes in big moments. Daniel O'Neal's coming in, and that is one of the most important depth pieces on the roster. He's coming in with experience. I think he's got a little more mobility to his game, a little bit more juice than Braden Locke, who he's nominally going to be replacing as the backup quarterback. So I would have Daniel O'Neal a little bit higher. And then finishing up the list, 3 more people got votes: Corey Walker, Jayden Ballard, and Gamir Latimer. So Corey Walker, the edge, kind of taller, bigger edge out of Western Michigan. Jayden Ballard, that's the other lottery ticket coming out of Ohio State. And Gamir Latimer is the cornerback they got from Jacksonville State. Those are all the players that got votes. So several guys in this that did not get votes that are coming in. Guys like, Perkins, Charles Perkins didn't get any votes. A couple other players, Eli Stein, the long snapper, didn't get any votes. So a couple other people in there that we're going to talk about next. I'm going to talk about my most underrated prospects on the community ranking show. And I'm going to specifically highlight a offensive weapon that could dramatically change the ceiling of the Badgers. That's next, Locked On Badgers. Let's talk about our great friends over at Prize Picks. Let's talk about our great friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is absolutely phenomenal. The ultimate place to get your real-time fantasy sports, daily fantasy sports. Prize Picks has, you're just picking more or less on 2 or more categories. It makes it really, really simple. You no longer have to compete on these season-long endeavors and journeys trying to figure out, how do I compete with these guys that this is all they do? They read every fantasy magazine. No, Prize Picks is simple. Just more or less than 2 or more categories. Touchdowns, yards, more or less. That's it. That's how you win. It's that simple. You're not playing against a bunch of ringers. They have injury insurance if your players are out of their lineup or they get hurt, which in a sport like football, that's the best feature since heated seats in my Hyundai. That's absolutely incredible. Right now, Prize Picks, you sign up today, you get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win. You get $50 instantly when you play $5 guaranteed. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege. Get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Let's talk underrated players. I'm very curious in the chat. I would love to get some of your most underrated players as well. I'm going to start on my underrated player list with Jayden Ballard. like I mentioned it, if there's one player that we don't talk about a ton that is coming into this roster, that's coming into this team, that could dramatically change the ceiling and the elevation of this roster, it's Jayden Ballard. Because Ohio State does not recruit a receiver unless he has NFL measurables. It's as simple as that. Not everybody works out there. Not everybody from there goes to the NFL, but they don't touch guys unless they're running like 4.4. They don't touch guys unless they're like 6'3", or they don't touch guys unless they're just electric in the open field. They just don't. They go to the buffet and they clean it out of all the best ingredients, and then I have to come afterwards and get a salad. That's what Ohio State does at receiver recruiting. Jayden Ballard is a physical specimen. He is big. He is fast. He is a burner. He is 6'2". He can run 4.4. Like he checks all the physical boxes. It's just, can you unlock it? Can you rearrange the puzzle pieces to figure out whatever's been missing with him? I did talk to somebody who covers Ohio State. The word I got was there's been some effort issues, is what I was told. I didn't watch it. I don't know. I don't follow Ohio State close enough to know why Jayden Ballard wasn't getting more reps. But the word I got from somebody who covering Ohio State was there are some effort issues there, that he had been asked to really turn it on over the offseason. It didn't happen for whatever reason. I'll say this, pressure can do a lot for people. Last chance, last opportunity can do a lot for people. This is Jayden Ballard's last chance. At his last year of eligibility, he has one more shot to put those immense physical skills to use. And you don't need him for a ton at Wisconsin. You don't need him to be Jeremiah Smith or Marvin Harrison Jr. You need him to be an effective deep threat that can really, really put pressure on the deep safety, that can put pressure on the corner, that can force a little bit of a deeper coverage, maybe a little cloud coverage or 3 deep, whatever it is. If you can get some of that out of him, that's a huge win for the Badgers, because then you can put him on the other side of Vinny Anthony, and you're really starting to put some real speed on the outside. And then you go underneath with Trechka Kahuna, you have Koziol. Ballard is one of the players in this portal class that if he hits, and I don't think it's likely he does because we haven't seen it yet with him, because he hasn't hit, and the odds of him suddenly turning it on probably aren't super high. But if he does, you have just added a supercharger to this receiver room. I think he could be a tremendous, when you look back at it, you could say that was a tremendous addition for the Badgers. A couple more underrated guys on my list. Charles Perkins. You're talking about a guy who's 6'3", has good size. Another player who I think is pretty likely to help out in that run defensive game. I think he fits into the rotation somewhere. Eli Stein. Nobody's going to talk about the long snapper. Nobody's going to give love to the long snapper. But man, you better have one. Man alive, you better have a good holder on kicks, on field goals. You better have a good snapper on punts. You had better have all those little components of special teams locked up, because when it doesn't work, and we've seen it on both ends as Wisconsin fans, as football fans, you've seen other teams have ridiculous special teams foibles, and you've seen Wisconsin have those same issues. Dropped punts against Ohio State are just nightmarish memories for me that fuel insomnia nights. Eli Stein's, like, if he comes in and he's a good long snapper, massive addition. That'll never get talked about. So he's underrated on my list. I talked about Tyrese Fearby. Daniel O'Neal, another one that I think Daniel O'Neal's an underrated component of this transfer portal class, because everybody's focusing on Billy Edwards. Obviously, it's a starting quarterback. You're focused on Koziol. You're focused on like the 6th defensive lineman you've brought in. You brought in another starting quarterback with a full season of starting experience at the Division I level. That's massive. It gives you instant insurance behind your starter that you brought in, where you feel like, worst case, if something happens to Billy Edwards, you at least have a guy who can go in, and you're not relying on a true freshman or a redshirt freshman like maybe Matt Toyer if he had stayed, or gosh forbid, you need your true freshman Carter Smith to step in. And I'm telling you, as high as we are on Carter Smith, that relying on a true freshman can be a disaster. So getting Daniel O'Neal to come in, getting a experienced starting quarterback that has played and played okay, getting him to come in and be good with being the backup. I'm sure he's going to be fighting for more the next year. He's going to be part of that battle the next year. I think that's a really underrated addition for this Badgers team, because we've needed a backup quarterback every year. Now, gosh willing, this is the year we don't, but I don't know. Needed one every year for a while. So it's really a good thing. It's a nice little insurance. It's a nice little binky to have to the side that you can turn to and say, okay, at least we know this guy isn't going to completely melt in the moment. He's going to be able to handle snaps. He's going to be able to take a hit. He's been in live action. We feel okay there, which again, for a backup quarterback, How many teams feel great about their backup quarterback, especially outside the top 4 or 5? You just need somebody there that you can turn to, and they're not going to drive the car off the cliff. Just keep it between the lines. Get me to the grocery store. Let's get what we got to get and get back home. Can you do that? I think Daniel O'Neal probably can, which is why I think that was a really nice addition for the Badgers and the Badger staff. All right, we're going to wrap it up there. Thank you all so much for tuning in. As always, really do appreciate it. This has been Locked On Badgers. Bunch more content coming up this week, as always. And when you're done, you go check out Locked On Big Ten, all the biggest stories from the conference with playoffs, realignment, NIL, all over there in the Locked On Big Ten channel. Go check that out next on Locked On Badgers. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk later.